Okay, so let's get going with today's topic. So what we're going to be discussing today is daily life practice, especially informal practice. So one way that you can think about the practice is you can think of it as a formal seated practice, well, formal practice, which is often seated, but not necessarily. So what is formal practice? Formal meditation practice is when you meditate, when your full attention is on meditation for a period of time of 10 minutes or greater. That's the definition of formal practice. Okay, great. So now what about informal practice, which is what is going to be taught and suggested today? So informal practice is practice. Well, so there's two kinds. There's background practice and there are micro hits. Micro hits are very similar to formal practice. The only difference is that you do less than 10 minutes of it in a row. So for example, a formal practice, you sit there for 10 minutes, meditate your full attention, best of your abilities on, let's say, the see, hear, feel practice. Whereas, by contrast, if you're waiting for an elevator and it takes a minute for the elevator to come back up, and you just sit there and you say, okay, you note the pressure in your feet, feel. You notice maybe some anxiety in your sternum, feel, etc. So, and then it lasts for just a minute. So that would be an example of a micro hit. Also, I'll go through a long list of different opportunities for meta practice here. I'm sorry, for meditation practice in daily life here shortly. Okay, good. So again, micro hits is just, you stop on the dime and then you do an act of mindfulness. Very, very helpful, very important. Next issue is background practice. So background practice is when, in contradistinction to a micro hit and formal practice, the majority of your attention is not on the meditation. Actually, the meditation and the kind of the meditative elements are in the background. So for example, if you're talking to your boss and you're paying attention to your boss, I mean, it would be foolish not to pay attention. But in the background, you're like, okay, pay like kind of close meditative attention to what he's saying. Also remain equanimous, like kind of stay with this. And if he says something that's triggering, see that you're being triggered and then kind of let it go. And also even, you could be working on an aspect of sensory clarity by like really paying close attention to the sound of his voice. So that is maybe a little bit of an overwrought example of background practice. And more typical example of background practice is, let's say you're filling out your taxes and you just kind of set the intention, I'm going to really work on my concentration abilities. So you might otherwise indulge more distraction, but instead you fill out your taxes, you just stay present and as absorbed in the actual act as possible. So that's an example of background practice. Okay, good. All right, so let's talk about some of the benefits. So off the top of my head, this is what comes up as possibly the most salient benefit to daily life in formal practice. So likely none of us are monks here, and we generally can't get away with, 5 to 12 hours of meditation a day. But in order for meditation to have the results, it's better to do as much of it as you can. And I would say there's generally speaking, a pretty linear relationship between how much you meditate and how many benefits you experience. So with that said, the workaround for householders, people like us that are not monks, is to do practice in daily life. So it's, you go to do the dishes and you do see, hear, feel while you're doing the dishes. That takes you 5 minutes. Okay, you're done. You move, you need to take out trash. You're doing see, hear, feel as you're taking out trash. Or, you're walking down the road and you're doing metta to all the beings that you see, the people, the birds, the squirrels, etc. So in a sense, it is a way, so daily life practice, informal practice, is a way to bring up the amount, the quantity of practice that you do. Also, a really important benefit to informal practice during the day is that the things that trigger you in your life, in a sense, might not come up in the same way in your formal meditation sit when you're, secluded away from the world. Rather, they come up in daily life. So if you bring mindfulness to a situation like maybe your wife is kind of upset and speaking to you in a way that's difficult for you. Well, in a sense, those times that you're triggered and having a difficult experience, those are the times that the meditation has the greatest return on investment. You're really getting to bring the meditation and kind of actively transform areas of your life that are maybe underdeveloped or maybe a problem for you. So another huge benefit of daily life practice is you get to bring it to the problems of your life and really affect positive behavior change. Okay, good. Also, let me make this mention that something that is very cool about the framing of unified mindfulness is that Shinzen focuses on how meditation is skill building, attentional skill building. So, and then we talked about this earlier, but Shinzen talks about that meditation is to build up the skills of concentration, sensory clarity, and equanimity. So let me explain those briefly. So again, just a reminder, concentration means you can hold your attention on what you deem important for as long as you deem important. Second, sensory clarity. That means you have a real-time understanding for your experience. You know the difference between an auditory thought and an image thought. You know the difference between a feeling and like a emotional type feeling and like a body, like somatic type feeling, etc. Then the third aspect is equanimity. So equanimity really means peace with how things are at that moment. Another way to define equanimity is to not push or pull on your sensory experience in the moment. So, okay, good. So if we take meditation and mindfulness if we understand it in terms of skill building, then it becomes intuitive and obvious that we can work on skill building throughout the day outside of a formal meditation session, right? So sure, it's obvious when you're doing formal walking meditation for 30 minutes, you're building those skills, but just in your daily life, you have all these opportunities to build up these abilities. And something else that Shinzen quotes is, Shinzen quotes some Zen master that said, the normal person is used 24 hours a day. The Zen student uses 24 hours a day. And so that's the benefit of informal daily life practice. Okay, good. So let me just go over my notes and see if there's anything that I'm leaving out. Oh, so going back to the issue of working through patterned behaviors, so problematic behaviors. So you can, with, let's say, the see, hear, feel practice, you can deconstruct problematic behaviors. I can tell you that in my own life, I've noticed how I've, like if I'm stressed, then I'll kind of generate stories and feelings, like maybe stories and feelings that bring up resentment or something like that in order to mood alter, right? Well, so that would be called an afflictive emotional regulation strategy. Whereas meditation in place of that is a wholesome emotional regulation strategy. So you could just notice, oh, like, look, there's this suffering here, and then just watch it dissipate, etc. And then the suffering passes, and then you don't fall into like an addictive / afflictive emotional coping mechanism, right? I hope that that's clear. Okay, good. Oh, another issue is, as is, I think at this point clear, you never have to worry about wasting time ever again, right? All your kind of dead time can be reframed into productive meditation time. Excuse me. Um, okay, good. I think that's basically it. So let's open it up for questions and comments, and then thereafter I'll read a long list of opportunities to practice in daily life. Okay, so is this clear to people, and what questions are coming up? So is this clear as to how to do informal practice? I tell you what, as you're thinking of that, I'll just read these two comments. Okay, yeah, Dan reports, yes, this sounds good to me. I've been trying to do this while doing the dishes lately. Fantastic, very good. And then two other reports here. Helen asks, is there a difference between feel good and traditional metta? Yes, there is. I really didn't teach feel good. I just taught metta. Feel good is Shinzen's kind of stripped down and kind of, I would say, kind of sanitized version of metta. That's one way you could think of it. It's not technically correct, but that's one way you can think about it. And so like metta would be an example of a feel-good practice, but I actually didn't teach feel-good. So, okay, I hope that spoke to your question. All right, and then Josh Behan reports, a squirrel just casually walked under my chair this morning, almost brushed my arm with his tail. I think metta meditation is responsible. Good report. All righty. So now I'll just read this long list of different opportunities to apply daily life mindfulness, and then we can open it up to questions again, and thereafter we'll meditate together. Okay. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to, shoot, I kind of forgot while that happened. But I was just going to ask as far as like when you're doing meditation, there's obviously like a bunch of different ways you can order things.
Right.
And do you kind of change your order up like as you're going along and go into the meditation, or are you more subscribed to stick with this like, you know, for lack of a better term, task list to and then keep on going from there? Because I did find that like I tend to be more of the like go into things with a plan. I mean, for example, I have like a sheet of paper I hold in front of me. I mean, put in front of me while I meditate to remember like what part I am in, whether I'm, but I did have one time where I kind of gave in to that. Like, okay, maybe I should switch some stuff up because maybe I'm just feel like I'm entering the meditative space now with see, hear, feel as an option, as just breath meditation, a lot of different options. They start to combine through the breath. And so I steered into it little because I just felt like I needed a little time for me, more time for me. And I just wasn't sure like how to reconcile those two opposing viewpoints in my head, where it was really beneficial for me to focus on them. I got the feeling that I just needed more time spent on loving me during that time and not less time spent trying to spread it out, for lack of like, you know, better terms. So I don't know.
Okay, so there's a lot of kind of different issues going on here in what you report, which is good. And I think that we can, I think I can speak to what you're asking about. So firstly, so let me just lay out different legitimate concerns to have as you're coming to the practice. So one is, I think you need to know yourself and be flexible and know what works for you. And you know, Shinzen, and we'll actually discuss this in a later class, but Shinzen talks about ION, interest, opportunity, and necessity. That we can choose what practice we do based on interest, opportunity, and necessity. So interest is like, oh, I find this practice interesting. Opportunity is like, maybe you're trying to meditate in a construction area and it's really loud, so you can't do a breath meditation that's focused on concentration. So you have the opportunity to do like Vipassana, which is more kind of all-encompassing and can kind of metabolize that environment really well. Whereas maybe an example of necessity would be, let's say you're noticing a destructive urge, like let's say you're working with addictions and you're inclined to drink or something, and so it's necessary for you to actually bring the practice to the urge, deconstruct it, so that you're in front of the urge instead of the urge being in front of you, so to speak. So to be clear, we want to make decisions about our practice based on interest, opportunity, necessity, instead of greed, hatred, and ignorance, right? Or inattention. So we don't want to just be kind of compelled through our practice by, let's just call it afflictive states. And so with that said, you need to like look at yourself, look at your own practice, and ask yourself, okay, what's driving this decision? If like, it strikes me as very reasonable and wholesome to be like, oh, hey, you know what? I just need to, as like a self-care routine, this metta session, I'm just going to send metta to myself, or I'm just going to send metta to the easy to love person. And I'm not, I'm not capable of sending metta to the enemy today. Like, no, that would strike me as very wholesome and skillful. And then now also you mentioned that, how to put this, that, maybe getting kind of confused about which technique to do. I would say, generally speaking, set your intention at the beginning of the sit to do one practice during that sit, or maybe the first 15 minutes, let's say metta, the second 15 minutes, see, hear, feel, and then try to stick to it as best you can. But at certain times, maybe your mind state gets really disturbed where you cannot do the see, hear, feel practice during the last 15 minutes. And you just have to stay with the metta for the whole time. And so that's an adaptive response to what's coming up for you right then. Did that speak to your question, Matt? And is there more around that?
Oh no, definitely. You definitely spoke to it for me. It just gets confusing for me because I go back and forth between like being very feeling centered and very logic centered. I think a lot of people do, but in my particular case, I'm like the person in the other class that has ADHD, and so I can tend to hop around pretty quickly.
Sure.
Not like some multiple personality type thing, but I can definitely notice I roller coaster, so I can go from extremes to extremes both ways pretty quickly.
Sure.
And so it's hard for me to be like that in meditation because I don't know, it gets like sometimes, like you said, like there, and I need to realize it, but there are going to be times where I can't do breath meditation because of the way my mind state is
Right.
going into things, and I might need to audible. But I've never used to have tools to do it until this class. I was just
Sure.
doing I've done most of the stuff we've done, but I've never known names or categories or any
Sure.
type of framing going into it. I
Yep.
was just at a temple or something and we did meditation or something like that. And
Good.
so I'm just trying to like pack it all in kind of nice so that I can figure out the way to deal with things and then move more into informal practice because
Right.
I'm pretty focused on the formal practice
Right.
side of things still right now. But you
Yep.
definitely spoke to all of that. Thank you.
Okay, great. And then another note that comes up is one of the ways that I like to think about practice, and this really highlights the importance of informal practice, is sure, formal practice as a standalone virtue is fantastic, but one way I like to think about the formal practice is the formal practice, doing it every day, is what potentiates and kind of fuels your informal practice. So, let's just say you start the day with 30 minutes of meditation, you end the day with meditation, 30 minutes of formal meditation. Well, you'll be able to like practice daily life mindfulness much better that day had you either not meditated or had you only done 10 minutes of meditation that day. So anyway, that's one way that I like to think about it, which emphasizes how important informal practice is. Okay, so here I'm just going to read out a list of different opportunities to practice. So we can practice informally in the following situations: in an argument, when upset, when distracted, when exercising, when talking. Like you can actually listen to yourself talking. You can pay attention to yourself talking while thinking, right? You can see your thoughts, hear your thoughts while walking, while waiting. I mean, waiting is probably, in some senses, the single thing in life that gets changed and totally transmuted with a meditation practice, because waiting sucks until you have an informal daily life meditation practice. Then waiting is a fantastic thing, and I relish all the opportunities to wait in my life. Like I used to love going on, I would never avoid, when I have to fly somewhere, I'd never avoid layovers and, multiple stops, because I knew that would involve so much waiting. And so I just meditate the entire time. Anyway, we can meditate when we're in a good meditation posture. You can also meditate when you're in a terrible meditation posture. And so I bring that up because the physical posture really kind of cues a mental state, right? So like if you're all slunched in a funny position, that can be a cue to meditate. If you're in a very good position, let's just say you're sitting there with good posture typing, that the posture can remind you to meditate. You can meditate when you feel belittled, right? And this would be an example of trigger practice. You can meditate when you feel great. You can meditate when you're selfing, right? So selfing means when there's this kind of internal self-referential narrative arising. You can meditate then. You can meditate when selfing has collapsed, meaning that, sometimes there's this experience of a personal you collapsing and it's not there. Good time to meditate. You can meditate when you're happy and blissful. You can meditate when you feel like shit, are depressed and anxious. And in that case, it's more of an equanimity practice. You're just being with it, building up that equanimity muscle, meaning just learning how to be unconditionally accepting of what is. You can meditate, you can do daily life practice when you're with your children or when you're with your parents. And now, this is another very important one. You can do meditation, you can do informal daily life practice when you're confused. You can do daily life practice when you're confused. You can do daily life practice when you're confused. There's a reason why I repeated that 3 times. In my mind, bringing mindfulness to the experience of confusion is one of the single highest ROIs, return on investment strategies with meditation. One of my old teachers, she used to say, confusion and wisdom have the same substrate. And that actually wisdom comes out of confusion. And if you can be with confusion with great equanimity, mindfulness as to what's happening, then wisdom will spring up. You can do informal practice while eating, while feeling hunger. When you're tired, drowsy, falling asleep, when you're lying in bed, when you're getting out of bed, when you have any form of insomnia. And let me tell you, this is a life-changing practice. I would really recommend that everybody reframe insomnia as just a tremendous opportunity for meditation. First off, when you meditate, when you have insomnia, you're really working on equanimity practice, because it's an aversive situation to be in, right? Also, I like to recommend that people meditate in all different postures: seated, standing, walking, lying down. But also, you want to meditate at all times throughout the day. In a sense, if you diversify the states and times during which you meditate, the meditation kind of gets in there a little bit more deeply. Like if you meditate in the morning, in the midday, in the evening, if you meditate when you're tired, when you feel like it, when you don't feel like it, then the body-mind kind of gets this message: okay, we are taking this seriously. I better get with the program and really align myself with meditation. So meditating in the middle of the night when you have insomnia is a really golden opportunity that I hope everybody who has insomnia employs. You can meditate while you're in a hypnagogic state, falling into the dream state. You can even meditate in deep sleep, even though that's a very high level practice, admittedly. You can meditate when you're sick. Getting sick is actually a surprisingly cool opportunity to meditate because you're worthless. You can't do anything, right? And so I've found that being sick is kind of inherently concentrating. It forces your mind into a state where you can actually meditate more easily because you have fewer options as to what you can do with your body. Also, as I've already alluded to frequently, meditating while you're sick is a fantastic equanimity practice. And again, equanimity is this metabolizing what's coming up in your life and staying calm no matter what. And wow, that is such a huge skill. Shinzen Young says that of the three core meditative skills, concentration, sensory clarity, and equanimity is the most important. And I can tell you that in my own experience, I concur. It's the most important. Okay, you can meditate when you are full of self-reproach. You can meditate when you're full of joy. You can meditate basically at any juncture. And I'll just say that the situations in which it's hardest to do informal daily life practice is when you're in discursive thought, or let's say reading something that's very discursive. Although at some point you'll be able to meditate during those times as well. But that kind of lays out the trajectory for you. Okay, that is it for the lecture. What kind of questions are coming up, or even comments?
I guess I'll go again.
Okay.
So when we were talking about posture and things like that during meditation, I was wondering if you had any tips for like some simple pre-meditation yoga or something that would have you like, because I just get caught up in all the specifics and there's all these crazy amount of different yoga things, but I really just want something that's like a routine that can limber me up to be ready to sit in my posture for meditation for a half
Okay,
hour.
let me get a sense. How many minutes worth of yoga would you be thinking to do? Would you be thinking to do like 3 minutes or 30 minutes?
Just like I always think about how it'd be such a easy lead-in to go from sleeping and then go and then do some yoga and then go into meditation and have that be the first like 45 minutes to an hour of
Right.
like my day.
Okay.
And so maybe something on the 10 to 15 minute scale of like yoga beforehand.
Yeah, you can, and I'll write this up. A routine that I do is it's based on how to grow a lotus. So if you look up how to grow a lotus, yoga, uh, that is a very good sequence to do. And then incidentally, I'll add that I teach retreats occasionally, generally like 1 or 2 a month. And then I always teach yoga, and both I teach 2 different kinds of yoga in the retreat, and both are specifically for meditation, obviously. And yes, I want to really echo what you're saying. It's really helpful to do a little bit of yoga before you do the meditation. And today I'll do a little bit longer pranayama sequence, which means breathing exercises, where we'll be like kind of moving the arms and like stretching, twisting, etc., which will be like a 3-minute, effectively like breathing and yoga sequence that I would recommend that you copy before your meditations at a minimum. Although doing more would be fine. And again, you can go and look up that how to grow a lotus yoga sequence.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, exactly. Yep. Zen Montpellier. Exactly.